All right. So shall I just start with a brief intro? Do you want to start with your project? What's your pleasure?
Yeah, no, um, uh, I know I sent it to you, late on a Sunday. I don't know if you got to look at
Yeah,
this
no,
little
I
cute
read it.
little
Yeah, I read it over.
wonderful, wonderful. And yeah, I started developing it's a homeschool curriculum for, hopefully for good speakers, I guess. I made an app that can help people organize their homeschool, at the direction of AI tools. I've been working with various ones, as everybody has, but more so Claude over the last few months. And I was working on a cartoon, which was like a history series. It was going to be like a Pixar like history series about inventions and inventors because I thought that getting some recognition for the contributions, basically, Western European and American inventors have had. This was kind of an idea I started to cultivate in 2020 with the BLM stuff and all this white people are a plague, it's all this kind of stuff. And I was kind of coming up with a defense myself. Anyway, I started to think that people could use a little more gratitude with regards to invention, and so I started developing that in like February. Well, in earnest, I was kind of working on it for like the last year or so, uh, here and there, and then in earnest, like full time February. And, I was kinda getting up to a launch position. I could tell that it was gonna be a big lift, a guy who's never created anything. Um, there's technical, advancements with AI, cartoons and stuff like that that, you're still really working hard to get exactly what you want, but I could maybe get it through, but it was gonna be like it looked like it was gonna be harder to get the funding and stuff, with Kickstarter, stuff like that, I'm not really a marketing. I don't have, like, a marketing back I didn't have a cartoon background or storytelling or anything, so it was, like, a lot that I was getting to, and so as I was, trying to procure some funding, uh, somebody asked me, you know, what feedback I've gotten and, what the market wants or whatever, and, 'cause they couldn't really see that, there was a need or whatever for a cartoon that was talking about inventions, and I disagreed, but I started talking to Claude that day about what does the market want with regards to homeschool and curriculums and stuff like that, or well, it wasn't really a curriculum, or it wasn't, but it was going to be for homeschoolers because the family was a homeschool family. And anyway, he started talking about tools that they don't have. That he went out and poked around. I asked him for pain points, and he started poking around and asking about tools. That people needed, and I said, "Well, I did this little thing for my dad, a week ago, and it made this little piece of software real easily," and I said, "Maybe we can do that," and so I kinda shifted to, like, that's gonna be the fundraiser, or that's gonna be the way that I get the money to make a show. So I worked on that, for basically all of May, for about a month, from, like, May 10th to June 10th, something like that, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I feel like, I mean, where I'm very close to it being a solid, planner with some unique aspects where it helps people juggle if they've got, if a kid's falling behind, or if a kid, can't is sick or whatever, and it just kinda moves minutes of their curriculum forward and makes it kind of really easy, and they could take weeks off. And I started to get some feedback from, some homeschool moms, and started adding some stuff in there, and I got a cool piece of software, I think, but it was still, gonna be, as I started to get a little bit of feedback, it was still gonna be kind of, more time than I wanted to get, uh, a subscriber base, basically,
Sorry, and
and
the
that's okay.
software
And
is to help manage a kid's progress through the curriculum. Is that right?
yeah, well, a lot of states, they need to track what, they're doing in order, in case the state asks, and in some states, they require it every year. And so, yeah, you feed the curriculum in, you say, Billy worked on math today and for this long, and then they have their full hours, and they got a paper trail,
And it's funny too
which
because a lot of people don't know that. So just for the audience who doesn't, homeschooling in Canada is a complete Wild West. Like there's no feedback, no requirements. They never contact you. They just, I guess, assume you're doing the right thing. And a friend of mine who homeschools in the United States was telling me that, they have to have a review every year. They have to keep detailed notes. They have to show progress. They have to keep all of the work to show the government. And it's one of these funny places where Canada is free, so to speak, and America is less free. Obviously, it's not like Germany where you're not allowed to at all, but it is unusual in that you do have to kind of keep all of this stuff and all of these records, and you can be cross-examined, they can audit, and so on. So the software helps with something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, and the United States in general is more is restrictive, but state by state is there's a lot of different restrictions, and it changes. Every legislative session sometimes, and or it's up for debate, and also they can change a policy, like a law is already in place, and they're going to start enforcing it in a different way, and so. That was another unique thing I thought that I did was, we we said we'd be the gold standard about, we're sending out crons 3 times a day to see what news has changed. We wanna be the first one to let people
Sorry,
know.
crons.
It was a new term to me, but it's like a thing where your website sends out and asks the internet for something. It's like a search or something, something like that. But it's automated a certain amount of time. And for me, I was doing it 3 times a day. And then I would get, news alerts, and they would get, that was to me. I wouldn't just have them be pushed out. I would have eyes on them and then say, "Okay, this is worthy of going to a person's phone or their email." And so that was an aspect, and then I made a field trip finder, which was well, anyways, the software is good, but I was increasingly apprehensive about the name that I picked, which was the name of my cartoon, which was about time. And the family was a time travel family. They were gonna go back in time and, see Gutenberg and see with the Watt engine being, developed and stuff like that, and so it was an okay name, and I hadn't come up, it was sort of tentative, but I was running with it because it was the best I had. So I had about time dot app, but as I was getting ready to launch, because we're kinda aiming for a July 4th launch here in a week.
And sorry, just to make sure I understand, the launch is the app, the cartoon, the website. I'm not sure how that relates to the curriculum that you sent me, and I'm trying to
Right.
get the
Yeah, yeah.
brain
I'm
cloud
sorry.
in a
Yeah,
vague
yeah.
line.
No, no, and it was just the app at this time. It was
Okay.
just the app, and it was gonna be July 4th. It was about a month ago, and I was feeling the need to rebrand, which I'd already done 3 times, mostly in the very beginning of the app development, but I was feeling the need. I didn't like the name didn't say enough. I didn't so I was just thinking about it, and I started, thinking about it increasingly, as I'm looking for domains and asking Claude what he thinks about them, was boiling down to things like virtue and veracity, and it was like art, a truth thing. It was a good values thing, and then I stumbled on one of the ones that was available was Romeschool, not romeschool.com, but at romeschool.app, and so I had like 10 of them, and I brought them to my wife, and she really liked Romeschool, and she's pointed out that it rhymes with homeschool, which hadn't even occurred to me, but I really liked the name Romeschool, and so I doubled down right away, and that day or the next day, it was always the next day that I'd wake up and I would have like a new idea that something I wanted to add to my app. But the next day after I got Rome School, I said, what did Rome teach? What could we do maybe that would be, kind of on brand for Rome, in like a curriculum thing, because that really helps get funding from different directions if you're not just a tool, but if you're actually something to teach. And yeah, so I asked the internet, what did Rome teach? And it was this orator, line. It was all making you you can argue a law, and you can participate as a citizen in Rome. I'm a little bit of a history guy, a little bit, but I'm not, this was new to me, and I was like, "Wow, this is a lane we could own." And so we started, me and Claude, I say we always all the time, it's kind of weird, but, we started developing like, kind of like a Roman rhetoric, uh, course, and it started off with the rhetoric course and the Grammaticus, which I, and their school came before that, which is where they learned, how how sentences go together and how the ancient poets wrote, and they would. Um, I put together a lot of stuff based on a lot of stuff that I've learned about, and I need to take these courses myself. But anyway, but Grammaticus was, I guess, it was before that, and I think we'll skip the one that comes before that, which is like the elementary school where you just learn how to read, write, and do basic arithmetic. But then it was I wanted to do like my American history of the inventions and American history in general, and then we wrote a Roman history, a Greek history, and then I something I really wanted to tailor and I was really happy about, which I actually did before the Roman and Greek history, was how Rome and Greece made their citizens. What, what changed when they were growing, and so when they were in power and when they were declining, as far as how they were growing their citizens, basically. And I ended up with something which I think it feels to me like if a kid, for the first time, I'm working on something that I would wanna use, like, the tool was cool, the cartoon was cool, I would wanna show my kids the cartoon, but this is, like, something that I wanna put my kids through. My oldest, turns 5, in about a month, and it's like a no-brainer. Like, I think that, if I wanted to, give everybody some, it just seems like we've lost, it feels like we've lost something as far as being able to speak effectively and persuasively. It's something I have worked hard to claw my way up to, like, the 20th percentile. I'm not very good at it, but, maybe this course will probably help me, I think, but with Claude, and it's gonna need a lot of editing, but with Claude, we got, like, a million words or something like that, and then the courses are about 3/4 done or something like that, which was a pretty quick run up in 10 days. It was a lot of steering from me in the beginning and making sure there's not, like, victim mentality. There's, the US history was especially, originally conceived, with the spine of wrestling with the idea of slavery, and we were built on freedom, and I said, let's just go to, it was a self-selected group of Europeans that, came over, and they, built a society where they could be free and build, the whole, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, I know, but, one cool thing I thought when I was doing my invention course was that, um, the main invention that Grok suggested was the most important as far as helping the world was the US Constitution, maybe because of the private property rights and the patent system, which kind of allowed a lot of, the big boom of American invention, and I thought that that was, a much more important aspect of US history. So that's, I'm trying to make this happen because, I'm a handyman by trade, and I'm spending way too much time away from home. Um, I've really started to lament coming home when my kids are asleep on the couch, regularly, and I'm trying to find a way to be useful to more people faster, get some better a better lifestyle, and so that's that, I guess.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I've worked with AI, working on a UPB movie, and AI is it's tough to wrestle with, man. It is like a completely brilliant and wildly inconsistent employee. Like you either get the Sistine Chapel or you get graffiti. There doesn't seem to be much like, oh wow, that's perfect. That's even better than what I was thinking of. Or you get something that's like, what drug trip are you on to produce something like this that makes no sense? And I'm wrestling with continuity, continuous characters, and themes, and so on. So, I mean, I'm not complaining because way back in the day, I was working on a documentary. Oh gosh, this has to be probably 12 or 14 years ago. And I had an animator, and I would ask the animator to do stuff, and he'd produce, the sort of wireframe things and so on. Kind of inconsistent, took him a while, and then he ended up just vanishing, because artistic types, right? They get better offers, or they suddenly want to go and quit and pick grapes or mime in Queensland or something like that. So being able to work with an actual AI video and image generator is really cool, but it does require a certain amount of patience, and it is like feeding a squirrel on cocaine, or feeding a squirrel with cocaine because they're just jumpy and all over the place. So I find it a really cool process to go through. And you probably have more patience than me because I will try like, 6 or 7 times to get something right. And then I'll just say, okay, I'll use captions. Like if I have a challenging piece of text that I want to do something visual with, if I'm not getting anything after 6 or 7 prompts that's even close to usable, I'll just go to captions. And I'm sure that there are lots of voodoo tricks out there. I've got whole newsletters of people saying, here's how you do AI, here's how you get it to do this, that, and the other. And I've never worked with Claude. I'm just working with Grok because Grok has no limits and it's already baked into my subscription on X. And so, yeah, I mean, how did you first start working with AI? Was it back in the day? Because I remember, I just out of curiosity, when I first started writing Peaceful Parenting a little over 2 years ago, I was like, hey, I'm curious what AI would come up with in terms of chapters. And, it was fine. It was okay. It wasn't anything, stunning or terrible. But how long have you been working with the technology as a whole?
Yeah, yeah, and it is a pretty cool thing that and I tried working with Grok a little bit, especially he helped me reform the American thing, pry it away from the slavery, spine and bring it back into something that I thought was a little more based, which I liked a lot, but he really has been struggling with, making long form, making whole lessons of any kind of length. Claude has been really good with, entire units. It takes him like 15 minutes, but he'll generate an entire unit, I don't know, 20,000 words, in a go and come back for more. But yeah, no, I started with AI, it was about, not that long. I mean, I was talking to Grok. Grok was my favorite because, I think that, I talked to Claude about a year and a half ago, and he gave me some pushback about why I shouldn't have the opinions that I have, and I was goodbye, Grok has been very good and helped me figure out, the invention, what inventors might be important and research those, and that was interesting, and so that was what I was working with last summer, but I really got interested in or working with AI in earnest in, like, October uh when I got, I was having trouble finding some work at the time, and my wife's grandmother, said, "You should really do music. You play piano." Uh, she thought that I knew how to sing even though she'd never seen me not sing,
Oh, so
but she
she's
said
she's like the siren luring you to the rocks. I know you're a father. I know you have bills, but
It's
follow
true.
your economically near to impossible passion. And, hey, it does work out, but so does winning the lottery. But it's maybe not the most conservative plan in the known universe.
No, no, of course not music, especially these days when everybody with a laptop and a Suno, a subscription can make something that sounds almost as good as what's on the radio. But she would she did recognize, something in me where it was like it was one of these things that from forever ago where that like everybody who's got a guitar and, thinks that, I could have someday if I would have just found a drummer or something, whatever. But, I'd always, carried that with me, and it was like, okay, I'll give it she says, "Hey, here's money for your family for 3 weeks, just give it 3 weeks." And so that was nice, and so I wrote frankly, my first, like, full song, and I'm 48, and so it was and I've been playing piano since I was 5 and
You're
thinking about making
48?
music. 48, well,
See,
thanks.
see now what you need to do is sell whatever youthful serum you're taking.
I
That's
know,
what
right?
you want to
Or
sell.
just make one, say that's my
That's right.
secret. It's true,
You too can take a nibble of my jugular for only 9.99. No, that's good. You look great. So yeah, you should. But you work with your body, and that certainly helps keep the blood flowing, and I think that can be quite good. But okay, so sorry, go on.
No, well, I yeah, and maybe that's why she thought a little bit, "Hey, there's still a chance," and, whatever. So I wrote a song. It was a complete song, and I thought it was kinda cool. In fact, I thought it was so cool that I put just myself playing piano on Facebook, to I'm sure the horror of my mother and anybody else who, knows me by association because I'm not much of a singer. I thought it was a pretty good song. It had a good theme. It was about a girl, who got talked into, having a certain procedure, when she was, by her mother kind of a thing, and then, ended up not having kids, and it was her, now she's a cat lady kind of a thing. It was I thought it was it almost made me cry a little bit. It was a good song, I thought. And it was okay, and then I looked up, AI and music or something like that after I put it out there because I was, like, trying to figure out how to make it more I was trying to figure out I can't remember why I breached the subject, but I found this thing called Suno, which if you're, a musician, you've probably heard of, and real musicians, hate it 'cause it's, AI really is the nail in the coffin of them trying to sell whatever kind of it made my song, like, sound like a radio edit.
Oof,
It
wait,
was
what do you mean?
amazing,
You
and I
just you feed in the thing and it just adds like bass drums and
Yep.
wow.
It yeah, it does the arrangement, and so, it's got all
Oh
the
my
build and
gosh.
everything like that. Yeah, so
Like
it
George Martin in
took
a
my
can.
exact
Yeah.
yeah, took my, exact chords and, the timing of the melody. I mean, everything was like it was important, and with it all, it sounded really good, and so I was really happy with that, and, so the next thing was, AI video, how do I make a music video? And then it was really a rough,
Oh,
thing, but
is that
I was
because you have trouble twerking yourself because you're pushing 50?
I
Is
thought
that the
I
challenge?
thought about getting a green screen and,
That's right.
that's
I
but
can twerk maybe
I'm in
twice
Paris.
and then I need to lie down, but sorry, go ahead.
That's right. I'm done. Yeah, yeah, but, it was like a story and it was rough. It was really bad, but it had elements that looked like a movie, like a real scene, and so I was like, "Well, if I could just take, these and I'll just reproduce it, and then edit it together with my little with my computer," and it was decent. It took a month, but I was pouring, like, 70 hours a week, and it was for the first time in my life, it was no problem to work. It was kind of revolution it was a wonderful experience that I wasn't making money, but I
And you
felt like I
get
was making
that,
something.
the male, like, so for women, they sort of have this great peripheral vision. When men get focused, it's like it totally closes, and everything is just this one tiny tunnel, and you're just making your way through the tunnel, and, everybody else, disappears, and you still care about them in an abstract fashion, but it's the task. The laser task must be completed, right? Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this meme of this guy, like he's in the gym, and it's like what men are thinking at the gym. It's like, I have to lift this, or I'm gay, and my whole family dies. And it's just that level of like hyper hunting focus. I must bring meat. Everything else is unimportant.
Well, that was it, and, like, whereas before that, I was, feeling bad when I wasn't around my kids and maybe, and spending as much time, when I wasn't working or whatever, and justifying sitting on the couch and playing with, the family and stuff like that, and here I was just apologizing day after day. I'm here for 5 minutes. "Okay, guys, I'm going back upstairs. Daddy's gotta make some money." And I got, you know, I don't know how I'd have to say with the amount of time, it was like 500 hours over the initial month was not, but then it was that turned in I was like, how can I turn this? Because it was okay, but I was like, "How can I turn this then can I make music videos, professionally? How do I get like crowdfunding?" I messaged this guy who does professional crowdfunding, and he said, "You need to do, like, a series." Like, that's the series are the ones that get the money, like millions of like, this series, let's see how they crowdfund it.
Sorry, a
And I
series.
said,
What do you mean?
like a TV series, like a web series, like in the old days, we'll go on TV, like a
Okay,
cartoon, that kind of
but
thing, and I'm like, "Well, what
that's
kinda"
not a music video thing, though, right? That would be like some sort of dramatic series
Right,
or comedy. Yeah.
and
So now
and
you
I
got to
think
be a not just a songwriter and a performer and an edit music video guy with AI, but now you've got to be a writer of dialogue and you've got to figure out how to get the actors simulated. And okay, I mean, it's hey, you know what? Here's a great way to make money. Just be good at absolutely everything. And you'll be making a fortune. It's like, it's hard to argue with that. I'm going to be a stone genius at everything I touch and the money will flow. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a nice business plan. I couldn't fulfill it, but I suppose some people. Anyway, tell me
maybe,
your story. How did the series
no,
thing
well,
go?
no, you're well, so I guess what I discovered when I was making the music video was that, Uh, it was the it was the video itself that I was really enjoying spending the time doing 'cause I was when I was a kid, I wrote on my wall that I wanted it to be like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Doug Barry someday. Like, I wanted to be a movie maker when I was a kid. Like, like That's this guy."
Oh, so sorry. I was like, "Okay, is there some guy that I'm not
Sorry.
aware about?" I was
Thank
thinking,
you,
is
good
it Dave
catch.
Barry, the comic writer? Okay, got it,
Yeah,
got
yeah,
it.
like, yeah, he
You're
wrote the
like the
funny
3rd
books.
of the Trinity. Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah, I just wanted to be like, known for, something,
Yeah, yeah.
and I grew up in a movie watching family, and so I always had that in the back of my brain, more so than music. I never if I wanted to do music, I would have done music in my life, but I was never really a draw. Like, I'm good at it, but I'm never a draw, but making stories, and I bought a nice camera over the last couple of years, a couple of them, but all of a sudden I was making videos online and, sold my cameras, just to, keep the process going so I decided I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make a cartoon about the history thing, which I was, kind of tentatively planning this time about, like, a documentary or something I was gonna make. I was like, "Let's do a cartoon. I can make it with the AI videos," and they travel back in time and they, get to show what happened and what life was like and how it changed and all that kinda stuff, and I was, pouring myself into it again for about, 2 months, or a month and a half, 2 months, same thing, 70 hours, 80 hours a week, and enjoying it, not feeling worse for the wear, loving the process, and then, yeah, like I said in the beginning, I, started to come out to the idea that it was gonna be kind of a longer process than I wanted to get it to the point where I could prove something that was, fundable and corral the funding and keep the lights on while I'm working on that, so turned to, what can I do for homeschool software, and, made that, and it's just about polished, and then, like I said, yeah, all of a sudden, once we add the curriculum, it's, top it's it's in there with, like, the big players for the homeschool apps, and it's got its own niche, and then once I start making money with that, then I can make a show. My wife is really she's like, "But you're gonna make the show someday, right?" I mean, 'cause she really likes the idea of this, cartoon history show. She thinks it's a really cute family that we put together and a cute house that they live in and stuff, and she wants to see that brought to life, and so that was the last 4 months, and I'm trying like the dickens to, justify it. Yeah, well, I mean, it's justified. It's just I gotta market. I heard you say that's the back of my head. I heard you say, I don't know how many years ago that, and maybe you can correct me, but I think you said something like writing the book is 10% and
Mm.
marketing it is 90% or
Well,
something like that.
certainly at the beginning. I mean, Stephen King doesn't need to do a lot of marketing anymore,
True.
but certainly at the beginning, I mean, I spent at least 80% of the time at the beginning of my podcast career, such as it is. I spent 80% of the time just promoting it, just going to websites and posting it on forums and just trying to get people interested and so on, because I was a director of marketing. And, everybody has a great thing in a drawer. I remember I used to do karaoke when I was younger, and the karaoke host, we would chat from time to time, and he's like, "Yeah, I've got this whole rock opera in my drawer." And I'm like, "Great, but why?" But why? I mean, at least try to get it out. And so most people have a great idea or something half finished in their drawer or something even totally finished in their drawer, and getting it out into the world, that's the brutal part, because you care about it and almost nobody, your wife cares about it, your kids care about it, you care about it, but nobody else really does. And then how do you make people care about it? How do you make people care about what you care about? That's sort of a very foundational thing in the world. And if you're not useful to the powers that be, like I think about Stephen King's first novel was Carrie, and Carrie, like a lot of stuff that was pushed, I mean, he's a good writer and all of that, but it was so viciously anti-Christian that, the Bolsheviks in marketing and the Bolsheviks in publishing are like, well, great, this makes Christians look terrible. It makes Christians look like they're terrible people who drive their children crazy because the mother's a religious fanatic, if I remember rightly. And so if you serve the powers that be, man, you're good to go. But if you don't serve the powers that be, then you have to find people who care about something with no high octane jet fuel from the higher ups, and that is a very, very tough thing to do. So I certainly applaud your initiative. Obviously, it's fantastic that you're so passionate about it. And of course, the hope and goal is that it ends up giving you more time with your kids, because, a couple of months for a passion project is not the end of the world when it comes to parenting. But it is a very, very tough thing to have people care about what you care about, because for a lot of people, sorry to ramble on, but for a lot of people, when you show up and you want something from them, which is either interest or funding. And even though you're going to say, look, it's an exchange of value, you pay me X dollars a month and I'll give you all of this great stuff. When you show up and you want something from people, you give them power over you. And people don't do well with power as a whole. And most people will be kind of either hostile or contemptuous or sort of indifferent in a superior fashion or so on. They maybe enjoy the fact that you want something from them. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel good, pompous, and all of that. So a lot of people, if you go out and you say, I really care about this. People are like, oh, do you? And now they have this power over you. And most people, because of the way they're raised in schools and all of this sort of stuff, they don't handle power very well. And so you've just got to grit your teeth and say, look, I know this is important. I know this is good for the world. I also know that me going out there saying those things is going to invite people to treat me badly. And they're going to treat me badly based exactly on how much I care about this. Now, this may not be true in the homeschooling community, right? I don't know much about the American homeschooling community, but I will say that that is a big challenge when it comes to marketing. It's one thing if you're just selling widgets or shoes or air conditioners or HVAC units or something like that. That's one thing. Then it's just a cost-benefit thing. But if you actually care about something that's moral or important for the world to become a better place and has some sort of ethical essence to it, which it sounds like you're working on, whew, man, people would just put the knife in, make sure it's rusty, twist it slowly, and smile at the same time. Not everyone, obviously, but that's where it starts, and for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'll be evaluating with a bias any pushback I get, as like you said, the power structure will promote what it wants to promote and what's good for it, and do the opposite for the opposite. And um, a big part of what I think is important about people becoming wise, because that's kind of the prerequisite I'm going to have for learning how to speak with persuasion. As far as like I can, derive, well, how can you become wise in the world in 2 years or whatever? It's going to be kind of like a history and science basis. But once people become wise and then they learn how to speak persuasively, that is inherently dangerous. And I think maybe a big part of what the power structure has been angling away from, maybe successfully, for who knows how long, 50 years or 100 years or however, maybe whenever it could, but maybe more effectively now. And so I'm sure I'm gonna get some vitriol that's gonna be, paid for, and or just people seem to defend the system that they're grown up in, and sense when something is outside of it and works against it, and they'll work against it too. So, yeah, I'm expecting a bunch of that, but, the angle, I think, besides, appealing to people's want for their kids to have virtue, and live a good life, is gonna be the social angle, which I'm just getting into homeschooling, but again, I'm asking, what are the pain points? And besides, an organizational tool, big one is, are my kids gonna be social? And my kids are 4 cousins out of 13, 12 or 13, right here in our town, outside, we're quite a bit outside. We don't have any, no idea where I live, but we're outside. Anyways, we're all there's 13 kids that are all like 5 and 6, and no, I think 6 and under. My kids are gonna be the only ones that are getting homeschooled, and that's the first thing I hear about from my mom is, how are they, they should really be around the cousins, there's a room in your cousin's class, and I think I think school had a reverse effect on me as far as like how my social I clammed up for like 15 years and pried myself out of it starting in my mid-20s, I think, mostly, as I recall it. So there's that, and there's a lot of reasons why homeschooling in general is not very, you just talk to your kids, they don't, what are they gonna learn from talking to another 8-year-old, it's like, but teaching them how to speak and think, that's gonna be anyway, that's my first concept for, like, a marketing angle is, maybe you don't care if your kid's virtuous, but you'll care if your kid can be a convincing, have a good conversation, be a good listener, and be a good participant socially, and so
And
that's,
it's hard to do. I mean,
yeah.
I hate to get into this old guy kids these days conversation, but youth are addicted to rapid fire moving comic images, like the Instagram stuff and all of that. And, it can be funny. It can absolutely be funny. It can absolutely be enjoyable. But there's no question that it's a cheese grater for your brain. It's a cheese grater for your concentration to develop an idea, to formulate it, to communicate it effectively, to overcome objections is a process of self-knowledge, commitment to principles, patience, and empathy. And kids don't really read fiction anymore. And fiction is one of the best ways outside of loving parents, or I guess alongside loving parents, to develop empathy, because you're literally looking into the brain of someone else and it teaches you empathy. And if you go to the bookstores these days, it's just absolute awful, awful stuff that's out there. It's all just, semi-Marxist social programming, and it's all for a political effect. None of it is a genuine exploration of the human condition and what it means to be alive and thoughtful in a society. Nothing like that. And so the lack of fiction, the lack of long-term dialogue, the handing down of brain shredding. They literally call it brain rot. I'm sure you've heard this term, like the 6-7 kind of stuff, the skibbity toilet stuff and phantom tax and all of this sort of stuff. It is horrendous on concentration and patience and empathy and long-form conversations, and it is all a spiral down for a lot of young people. It's a spiral down to like the most edgelord, shocking statements to see who can outpace each other in the grim unraveling of any sacred cows. And that's really tough for long form conversation. So what you're doing in terms of helping people build the concentration, the empathy, and the throughput to communicate effectively, boy, that is really going to differentiate people in the workforce going forward. One of the things that's tough with young people is just basic eye contact. They're actually not used to looking at people. They're just used to looking at screens. And having eye contact, which is, eye contact, firm handshake, good posture, all of that kind of stuff that was sort of drilled in by the Mad Men generation, which, it's a lot of good stuff. They can't seem to maintain that. But at the same time, and of course, there's costs and benefits to everything, but at the same time, they also the degree of corrosive skepticism among young people these days to all of the sacred cows, some of which they should be skeptical of and some of which they should absolutely be hostile towards, is really quite remarkable. So, there's pluses and minuses for sure. Concentration, empathy, patience, throughput, communication, following a line of argument, and so on. And the back and forth of conversation, I'm sure you've heard this when I do call-in shows. I usually spend the first 15, 20 minutes just trying to figure out when I can and can't talk because I'm not in the room with someone. I have to just go with audio cues. So just getting the ebb and flow of conversation is tough. But at the same time, they've been exposed to a lot of information that goes against generalized narratives and things that my generation would find shocking. They just shrug and accept. So, so if you take that skepticism and you combine it with good skills in rhetoric and conversation and debate, boy, this would be a very powerful force among the young. So that's why I think one of the reasons I was interested in what you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah. You mentioned eye contact, and it's funny because we go for walks, stroller walks with our kids, and it's normal to when anybody my age or even just a little bit younger, as you're walking past them, there's a certain point where you make eye contact, nod, kind of wave, and then when you get right near them, how you doing? None of that with the kids. You'll never a 17-year-old walking down the street with his or sidewalk usually with his phone, and he'll barely look up just right when you're getting there just to make sure you're not going to jump at him or something. And it'll never look at you in the eye and never, nod at you or anything. I mean, just, kind of pretend like you're not there. That reminds me of something like there's something where it feels like kids kinda treat the world like it's the internet where they just, they tell it what they want or they ask it what they want, and they don't have to say, "Oh, okay, thank you," or whatever. Like, I find myself, thanking Claude, "Okay, please continue," or whatever, It's like,
The
I
amount
can't
of water that is consumed for the sake of Gen
me
X
being
and
polite.
elder politeness, like
Oh,
I
that's
have to
true.
remind myself not to say please and thank you because it's just wasting compute cycles for for the entity that doesn't care at all, right? It
It
is,
doesn't care. Yeah.
but that's another thing too, is that politeness among the younger generation appears to be fairly absent. I mean, I was raised probably a little bit too much with, respect your elders and please and thank you and all of that. But young people, It's really remarkable just how little respect they have for their elders. I'm not saying that a lot of us haven't earned it, earned that lack of respect, but it's almost completely gone. The youth culture. I mean, of course, they've been programmed. Every kids show, the parents are idiots and doofuses, and the kids are cool and wise and know everything, and that's just a way to make sure that the kids can be programmed by peer pressure in the media and bypassing any parental wisdom. I get all of that. That's just a standard control mechanism for culture. But yeah, it's really wild just how little respect there is for any kind of elder. And again, it was a bit too much for me. You'd go into a room with a mom or dad, and you'd be like, "Oh, gotta keep my elbows off the table, and I gotta make sure I don't speak while I'm and don't slip my tea." That. So I get that may have been a little bit over. Gulagged, but it's really, watching that pendulum swift is a pretty wild thing.
Yeah, and, the stuff that your parents teach you for how you have to behave in front of them, of course, when you do that when you're in a room full of strangers, you're at a new dinner, whatever, with strangers, you don't rub people the wrong way. You learn how to not rub people the wrong way. My wife had the idea that we should make, it seems like every day in the last 10 days I've added some course or something like that, but she thought that, like a manners and politeness course, and so I was like, "Claude, what do you think about this?" Like, he's like, "The Greek writers and the Roman writers, they had a name for this, like, this was a thing that they taught." It had a formal. I couldn't tell you what it was organically, but anyways, there was it has a formal foundation. It's not a stretch to have a course in, usually it's a little bit younger, but to have a course in manners and politeness, and yeah, it does seem like you said, that the kids seem like they've been programmed out of having respect for anybody, but especially people that are older than them, and maybe we old people don't have a whole lot of perspective. Like, I have no idea what kids that are 18 do, like, on their phone, or 20 or 22. Like, I have no idea what they do. I feel like, well, I'm getting off on a tangent. I feel like, there's still that draw to, you know, find purpose and meaning, however misplaced, but or however it's being misused. For me, it was video game. Like, I was a very early adopter of playing video games all day. That's all I wanted. When I was 18, I wanted to find. I almost became a priest because it seemed to me like I only had to work one day a week, and I could just play Ultima Online, for all the rest of the time, and that was my goal, was to find a place to be able to do that. And then I was like 35 before it stopped being fun. Thank God it did, and then I was like, it was like waking up, and then I went out, and that's when I became, frankly, a handyman. I was doing a whole bunch of just little jobs, the littlest that I could do to pay the rent at a room with my computer. As long as I had my computer and a place to sleep, I thought that was all it was gonna take to make me happy for my life. And there's, like, a little bit of that, purpose and meaning, and you grow, the growth that you get from leveling up and stuff like that, that I could see just kinda grabbing a kid's, purpose and
You should
meaning.
mean
But
leveling up. You mean like not in life, but in the video game.
in the video
Yes,
game, yeah,
yes.
yeah, 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 you get the experience, the experience, and, yeah, so I'm sure that these kids have that, and um, anyways, that's a topic for another time, is, figure out how to help them, figure out what they wanna do with their life. But I've got one course which I think addresses just that, called, the good life, or I forget exactly what it's called, but that's the essence of it, is, like, what is life well lived, and, hopefully that's gonna help people. So many of these things are authored and barely edited, and I've got to look them over. But I did a lot of steering with, how it was going to lay it out and stuff like that, and push back, and I got a good skeleton, I thought. But and hopefully it's got a good skeleton. Hopefully these are going to be really good. I'm really hoping. I don't know how long it's going to take to get these out. I would like to think that. I mean, it's like it's going to be like 1.5 million words. I think it's going to be something like a year, but hopefully
Sorry, when you say
I
it, you're referring to the general curriculum or some specific part?
curriculum. Yeah, the curriculum, and actually, the specific part is notable because I'm gating. My plan as of a few days ago is to gate some. To We're not going to let people learn how to be a persuasive speaker until they've taken our stuff that we think is going to, me and Claude think are going to make you more wise or whatever. Um, because it's funny. I studied with a Taekwondo master during a chapter of my life when I was about 37. I was grandmaster in Los Angeles, lived in the dojo, me and about 20 guys lived in the dojo. All of them were almost all of them. One was older than me, but all of them were younger than me. And, practiced twice a you know, 3 practice 3 times a night, or 3 nights a week, and then in the morning, the other then 3 mornings a week, we'd get up at 6 AM, listen to him talk for an hour, and then go outside and do running around like we're Rocky, doing different wind sprints and stuff like that. But anyways, he was a guy who would try to teach you about, life and being a good, going and getting what you want and stuff like that. He was a very interesting guy. He was like about 80 years old, but very early in his career, he came over from Korea and he was in San Francisco and uh, he taught all this stuff to Jim Jones, who went off to do all that stuff with the Kool-Aid. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But
yeah.
Jim Jones was one of his guys. And ever since then, it kind of occurred to me that you gotta be careful who you who you who you give the keys to the kingdom to, you gotta make sure that they got their heads in the right place kind of a thing. And so that was kind of the inspiration for me doing the gating of the redder part of it. Yeah, I guess I'm probably not gonna have to, in general, have to, have that specific thing ready, but yeah, the kind of the first steps, I guess, I could probably have those ready in a month. I it's gonna be a big lift. I don't, uh because this is a public call and it feels like I'm putting myself in a vulnerable spot, but, what the heck? I guess I'm already there. I don't know to what degree you feel like you might be interested in working with it, but, I fancifully, pictured, uh, there's this part of it where kids are arguing. They have things called declamations. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it has something. It's the more free form verbose, making an argument part of it, which I think parents are going to struggle with knowing how to grade it and stuff like that. And that itself, it could be like a lot of time. I don't know, like watching a video and getting feedback, or even doing it one on one. But uh, um, but yeah, in addition to coming up with maybe ideas that this because I don't know anything about any of this. I know very little about this stuff, of course. 10 days. Like, what did the Romans do? 10 days ago. It seems like it makes sense that it's going to be good. But you've, I mean, just when I got to like I did a philosophy survey book, and then I got to a history of philosophy book, and we did the skeleton, but I put it to the side and didn't work on it because I sent you the email, and I know that I mean, you wrote a book, the book on it, I believe. But I'm sure that there's parts of this that you'd want to have your hands on more than others. I don't know. Have you thought anything about that?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. Listen, first of all, I hugely appreciate and respect the ask, right? Because it's hard to ask, for people who haven't gone through this entrepreneurial stuff, to do the ask and to say, "Hey, can you help me out with this project?" Or I think you could add some real value. Hugely respect the ask, and people don't know how tough that can be. And so I hugely respect that. I don't know as yet. I will say, though, that I think that the most value that I could provide to you at the moment would be how to get it out there. Because if it's out there, then it's worth more for me to contribute to. If I contribute to it, that's not going to be enough of a lever to get it out there. And if I contribute to it and it doesn't get out there, then we've wasted our time, if
you
that
have a
makes sense.
waste? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, listen, if I have thought countless times over the course of my entire life, how would I teach philosophy or debate or rhetoric to kids? I mean, I'm pretty good at it. And I think I'm not just one of these guys who's instinctively good at it. Like there was some actor who had this sort of famous thoughtful gaze, and somebody's like, "Well, how do you do that?" He's like, "I don't know. I stare at the ground. I just kind of unfocus my eyes." And I can't remember which actor it was, but it's like, and people think he's thinking about life, the universe, and everything, and he's just blurring his vision. He doesn't know what he's doing. But I actually have examined the sort of principles by which I formulate our ideas, arguments, and converse. So I wouldn't be one of these guys who's just like, well, just do what I do, like I don't know why I do it. I don't know how I do it. It just kind of comes to me in a dream and then I write it down, but I actually have some idea as to why I am able to do what I do. So I think it would be helpful to get that across. I do certainly appreciate that you want to make sure you don't give the weapon of rhetoric to evildoers, because they can use it, as they do, very, very powerfully. To learn the art of the argument, the art of rhetoric, without a foundational moral base is a very dangerous thing, of course, because then you're armed. You arm the bad guys without arming the good guys, and that's like not a very good combo at all. So the challenge is to get people interested in it. Now, getting stuff from zero to some sort of market penetration, I've had, oh gosh, a wide variety of experience with that as a whole. And I'm not sure what things are like in the realm of modern tech, because it has been like 20 years since I started building this show up. So, of course, back in the day, you would go to conferences. There are tons of homeschooling conferences. So you'd go to conferences, you'd have a booth, you'd try to become a speaker, and you would try to abstract something from what it is that you're doing to be of value to the homeschooling community as a whole. But having a booth and chatting with people the way that we used to do it in the business world is you would ask for people's contact information. I did a lot of business-to-business sales. So I would offer a free, I don't know, like it was free. What did we do back then? We would give a free iPod. This is way back in the day. Free iPod, right? You just put your card in, and that's how you gather cards, and then you just do follow-up, and you do your phone slogs, and you send out your emails. You try to arrange for meetings to go and present and so on. So that's B2B, but you're business to consumer. So there are, of course, tons of conferences. You might have to leg it a little bit to get out there, and there's some fees for setting it up, but it's sort of how to raise interest, as you talk about the sort of ways to raise money to do it. And it's good that you're infusing labor into the AI stuff, because, of course, if you say, oh, I built this whole thing using AI, the natural investment response is to say, well, then just about anyone can do it, right?
Too.
Right.
Yeah.
Or people can just say, teach me rhetoric to AI, and AI will come up with a series of. Now, so a couple of questions are popping in my mind. How would you mark the students? Because you're going to give them some sort of certification of completion and so on. And I assume some of it, because it's rhetoric, it can't be multiple choice answers, which can be marked by a computer, but you're going to have to evaluate argument and flow and content and structure and grammar and so on. And AI can do grammar, but how would you have the students' coursework, especially if they're doing freeform? Let's say they submit a video of here's how I would do this argument, or they have a debate and you've got to mark the participants. How would that get graded?
It came up with a rubric, which I haven't looked at, but it's something that it tells the parent what to look for. And maybe the kid, maybe it'll probably be like, I imagine the parent would video, and look back at and be able to, so they don't have to absorb it all and just have it, bouncing off of their, what they have no idea about anyway. But I guess what do they call it here? It's
No, so the short answer is, would it be graded by people or AI?
Uh, yeah, and it would be graded by people. As far as the complex stuff, as far as like how people make arguments, kind of a thing. I think would have to be. I think would have to be. And so I'm picturing uh, if there's if there's enough money, that it's something like a team of tutors who sees the videos and grades them ultimately. That's kind of the ultimate infrastructure I would see working, some team of experts individuals rather, who could watch a video, give the feedback, give an indication about the marks and be open, I guess, maybe even open to actual tutoring also.
And what is the head count of user base that would make it economically viable?
Not many. Uh, Not many, because software has a notoriously large margin, if I'm saying that right. But
It's scalable, yeah, for sure, because you get the one product and people can just keep feeding into it, and each additional user is almost no cost.
Yeah, yeah, so, I mean, it's a few, but, I mean, there's a million is it a million? There's 4,000,000 kids. There's 4,000,000 homeschool kids right now, and, well, 2 a year and a half ago or whenever that analysis was done, and the market is expected to grow to double in the next 5 years, by 2031. That's the money spent. I'm not exactly sure if that's scaling or if it's but it's gotta be somewhat maybe proportion because the homeschool audience is growing faster than, it's bigger than it was before I'm sorry, at the peak. It's bigger than it was at the peak of, COVID when a lot of people started homeschooling, and then it what took a dive, and now it's on its way on its way back up. So anyways, with there being 1,000,000 homeschool families, I mean, if I had 50,000 or 10,000, it would be a lot, a lot of money. I haven't come into the or I haven't figured out how much that would have to go out into the grading of the rhetoric uh, and some other stuff, but almost everything except for that segment is kind of controlled. It could be, a five-man team or something, at the most or something like that, and so has the potential to be, some money.
And would you
Yeah.
require the people who do the grading to have credentials?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would want them to be as skilled and give as much value as possible,
Yeah, they wouldn't
for
necessarily have to be teachers, but they would have to be people with some skill, obviously some skill in the subject, right? You want somebody who's at least got a math degree to do the math grading if it's more complex and so on, although math grading can be done by AI a lot more easily than analyzing an argument. Although, I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to see how good AI is as it continues to develop at grading people. And providing suggestions and tips and so on. Again, the more that can be automated, the better. But the more that can be automated, the tougher it is to monopolize, right? So now the other question, of course, in America, from what I understand, there are homeschooling communities where some teacher will teach. No, sorry, some parent who's good at something will teach it and so on. And that's how they solve the problem of socializing, right? So
Mhm.
they will
Co-ops.
get together, as you pointed earlier, the sort of the road trips or the field days and so on, field trips, and so and they get together for games and they have their proms and dances and so on, and so with the AI, the online stuff, the course curriculum. Would you have physical meetups? Would you facilitate that kind of thing? Because that's what a lot of people are looking for.
So, yeah, I mean, well, part of my app was this field trip idea because there's not a real good field trip, which is not in and of itself multifamily, but Uh, I built this thing that would, it's got like 40 is it 40? Sorry, 24,000 field trips, whatever. And AI did an analysis pass on, if it's good for science or whatever. And then it's got the ability to say, "I wanna do this. I'm open to doing this with other families, and let me know when a certain kind of critical mass is reached," and then somebody will have the opportunity to organize it. It's sort of like it's a slightly different thing, I th and I'm kinda brand new to all this stuff, okay, like a month ago, but I understand that co-ops is I think that's what you're talking about, and we do have a co-op, I don't know, a registry basically, and it's gonna hopefully, have where people can tell it if there's openings and stuff like that. But, I haven't thought anything about this, but that's very smart. You can have, like, one parent in a co-op who gets good or is good at grading rhetoric and is able to do that in one pass, maybe like once a month or something like that, to move the ball forward like that. Yeah, that would be, yeah, that's smart. I like that. That's a good idea.
In the business world, I don't know if this is still considered a thing. Back in my day, we do something called a SWOT analysis, which is SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the strengths you've been talking about, the weaknesses would be relative to other homeschool curricula, other homeschool approaches, and there's just a wide variety of homeschool approaches. So your strengths would be, I think, stuff you've gone through. Weakness would have to be relative to other opportunities. Of course, you talk about the doubling of people and so on. Some of those people are going to be absorbed into existing homeschool groups. So one of the ways that homeschooling grows is, your neighbor that you're friends with is homeschooling, and then you're like, their kids seem happy and productive, and then your kids are being bullied, or it's too woke or too anti-white or anti-male or something like that, or they're threatening your kids with, if we just give them some adjusted meth, your boys will be very, very happy with this ADHD medication or something like that. And so something happens that vaults you out of regular school. And then, you talk to your friend or your neighbor who homeschools, and they say, oh, yeah, well, we're part of this group and so on. And then you kind of get absorbed into that, which would be, so just because the market's growing doesn't mean it's growing in a direction that's going to focus on you. Because again, there's a lot of feed-in mechanisms, or you just, you Google, homeschool groups in my neighborhood, and then you go and talk to them and see if there's a good fit and so on. But some of the homeschool groups, of course, have very specific requirements, which I'm not sure would be part of what you're doing, which is, you may need to be of a foundational religious belief in sort of X, Y, or Z denomination and so on, because they want to keep that mindset among the kids and so on. One could say they don't want to expose them to opposing views, but that may be uncharitable. They want to keep a consistency of belief system within the group. So that may not fit for everyone. I do think that non-fundamentalist homeschooling is a big thing that's coming, because there are a lot of people who are conservatives but not fundamentalist in their religious beliefs. They are somewhat Christian or agnostic or even atheist, and the homeschooling opportunities, I think, for that is not big. And of course, you would want to cover the Christian stuff, but I think if you had an approach that would be welcoming to more secular, objective, non-religious people, I think that's going to be a underserved market. And it's one of these things, there aren't that many atheists who homeschool, which means there aren't going to be many atheists who homeschool because they can't find the kind of community that they want. And I think that their atheism is one of the biggest growing belief systems, and there is a lot of dissatisfaction among atheists at the quality of education. Not all atheists are hyper leftist libtards, but I think that would be a very interesting module to build, and would be, there's no reason why it couldn't coexist with a religious module as well. But I think that kind of stuff is a opportunity. So yeah, the strengths you have, the weaknesses you have would be relative to other flows of getting people into homeschooling. The opportunities, certainly there's a lot of people coming in, and some of those people are coming in. Of course, homeschooling in America in particular grew because of increasing secular humanism in schools, and people wanted to be able to maintain their religious beliefs with their kids. But now the socializing aspect of schools has diminished considerably, particularly with multiculturalism, right? Because, of course, if half the kids mostly speak Spanish and half the kids are from wildly different cultures that you don't really know how your kids are going to socialize with, then the sort of socializing aspect of school becomes a little bit closer to, imagine an ad is like, hey, do you really need to develop your social skills? Have you considered prison? You'll be locked in with people and you'll have a whole lot of interactions with them. There will be no escape, and most of them won't be super violent, right? So that would not be a big, could be kind of a funny ad, but that's what, it's a whole lot different. And people, like your mom or your wife's mom, they're looking at school like back in the day, like back in the 60s, like, 95% white and everyone comes from the same belief system. And therefore socializing is a plus, but it's a whole lot different now. So I think that the socializing argument is less positive. I think bullying is up, particularly the cyberbullying stuff. And of course, the peer pressure stuff, because there's a bunch of real feral kids out in schools these days who are, it's not just the people who call in to my show, but a lot of kids who are like, my body count at 16 is 5. And, I started doing drugs and drinking at 14 or 15. And they're really trying to spread this. It's like the bad guys don't just, it's a virus, like it spreads. And so there's a lot of that stuff that's going on. Gang activity is fairly big and fairly difficult in the world of school these days. And of course, the content has just become, I was so lucky when I was a kid because it was all just boring. Like, boring is way better than toxic and invasive and trying to set you against your soul, your skin,
Parents
your
and everybody else,
gender.
yeah.
Like at least all I was bored. I wasn't constantly told I was an evil guy for breathing. So I think that there is a lot of refugees coming out of government schools, not for the reasons that American homeschooling was originally founded. Which, I mean, there's sort of two elements of homeschooling. One is the foundationalist Christianity, and the other is just the hippies, right? Just the counterculture. Don't let the man tell you what to do, and you can study at your own pace and do whatever you want. The bong indifference and anti-parenting or unparenting stuff that's been going on, which I think is actually really bad and fairly toxic. Kids need involvement. They can't learn on their own any more than you and I can invent all the technology required to have this conversation. So I think the opportunities are, one of the things that I would do as far as marketing goes is I would dig up how dangerous, toxic, and negative schools are these days and say, my argument would be, okay, if your kid had a friend who was saying this, if your kid had a friend who was doing this, if your kid had a friend who hated him for his skin color or hated him for being male, if your kid had a friend who said you can only be my friend if you do these drugs, well, that friend is your school, right? And because, the schools are saying, hey, if you want your intelligent kid to sit like a turnip for 6 hours a day, he's going to have to take these psychotropic drugs. I mean, that's really, really terrible and dangerous stuff. And so, or, if you would get the average stats of like drug use and promiscuity and alcohol use and so on among kids at the age of, say, 15 or 16, and, let's say it's 20%, 30%, 40%, like, would you let your kid be part of a peer group where a third of the kids were doing drugs and sleeping around? It's like, that's your classroom. That's where you're sending your kid, right? So to sort of personalize it and all of that, and then look at the trends for cyberbullying, for other kinds of bullying, and say, you're not sending your kid to the school you went to. That's another thing I would say to parents. Like, this is how the school looked when you went. This is how the school looks now. Do not judge. This is like saying, it's like going to the I would say, would you go to the cell phone store and say, I need a rotary dial phone? No, because they'd say, well, actually, you're old enough to know. No, you're not. Probably not even old enough to like the
Just
rotary
barely.
dial, right? Just barely, right?
Yeah, I remember 'em. I remember, yeah.
Right. So you don't go to
Yeah,
the
no,
car dealership and ask for a Model T, right? So helping parents to understand that they cannot judge what their kids are experiencing by what they experience. There's been way too much of a change, and you can talk about the demographics, the language issues, the different belief systems, the cyberbullying, the promiscuity is way up, the drug use, I think vaping and all of that has increased in some areas. So helping kids, so the first thing with selling a solution is helping people understand that they have a problem. And I don't think if parents say, well, my school wasn't that bad, public school is fine, and it's free, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's not free when you have to pay for rehab. It's not free when you have to pay for a psychologist to rescue your kids from toxic ideology. It's not free if your kid decides he wants to do something crazy medically, right? So I would say that part of the marketing, fear is a big motivator, and fear is not something you want to misuse. Like, fear is not, like, are you afraid of missing out on abs? You need to drink this beer, right? So you don't want to misuse this kind of stuff, but there are legitimate concerns that parents should have, particularly as people get older as parents. Like, the age of parenthood used to be early mid-20s, now it's late 20s, early 30s, and that means that they're further removed from the changes in education since they were little, and so on. And the changes in education are pretty wild, because when I was a kid, I was being taught by people who'd been taught by people in their 30s. So it was very sort of objective, again, kind of boring, but not toxic. But now, as you get this radicalization that has occurred in teachers' colleges and universities, now your kids are being taught by those who were radicalized, 40, 50 years ago, and it's a whole different education system, and you can get samples of the curriculum and say, if your kid had a friend who was telling them this stuff, would you encourage that friendship? And of course, so if you personalize it and help people to educate people as to how things have changed and the dangers, and really the kids in schools these days, particularly white males, are facing existential threats to identity and self-esteem. Because it is absolutely constant. Well, you don't get any points for privilege because you're a white male, but as a white female, you get a few more points. It's just this crazy Marxist hierarchy of victimization, and the purpose of programming people with victimization is to make them feel justified in violence and aggression and abuse, right? Because if you're a victim, you're a cornered rat, you fight back, right? So constantly telling people they're victimized is ginning them up for violence, which is now coming and is only going to escalate, unfortunately. So helping parents to understand how much things have changed and personalizing it. Like if you had a friend who was telling your son this, and this, would you consider that friend toxic? Well, that's your kid's teacher. And here's your solution, so you tell people of the dangers, right? And then you say, here's a guy dying of smoking, talking out of the hole in his throat. Here's a guy dying of smoking. Then, the angels come down and here's your smoking cessation program with a 90% effectiveness rate. You can avoid this fate. So I think telling people the genuine concerns that they should have about their children, and then, here's the solution. And, are you concerned that you're not part of this particular fundamentalist group and therefore you're not welcome in homeschooling? Here's our Greco-Roman Enlightenment-based, rationality-based, maybe a deist-based or non-focused on particular religious issues. We teach your kids how to think, not just have faith, or something like that. So while we also welcome people with faith. So this is just
Yeah, I
off the
think that
top
you
of my
can.
head. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no. I think that there's a lot of people that we come across in our neighborhood. My wife, we're meeting people as she goes for walks, and we're meeting a lot of people that have they're Mormons, and they've got very good arguments. They make they're decent anyway. They make arguments, and I think that giving this just shows me that people that have religion, they want to be able to make arguments, there's no reason to think that people that can think and make arguments are going to be more one way or the other, and I mean, there
Well,
is,
because
but there isn't,
Christians are a
but
little bit on the defensive as well, because of the sort of onset of secularism. So they have certainly honed and refined their arguments, which may have been left fallow when they were more dominant. But sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, but, I mean, I it was interesting that you said that the fundamentalists or kind of the biggest maybe segment of the homeschooling thing has kind of a religious basis, 'cause I never even thought of that. Like, I first, I guess, maybe started thinking about homeschooling, uh, there was 2 things. One, I was in Los Angeles, and I was poor, so I was taking the bus, and these kids would be they would be at the bus stop going home from high school and with, like, purple hair and nose rings and they were just, standing around doing they looked like I didn't wanna get off the bus right there, I mean, just outside these high schools, and I said, if I'm gonna raise a family, I'm gonna leave Los Angeles." And it also kinda, made me start thinking, and then, then the COVID thing, where all these parents were like you said, they're so removed from what the kids are learning, and then they had a front row seat if they wanted it, and a lot of them did, and they started saying, "I've gotta take charge of my kid's education because I can't trust." I mean, this is if this is the little bit that I'm seeing, it's kinda like when I'm writing a program and it gives me a sample, and I'm like, "If this is what you're writing, like, you need to fix this and this,"
I mean, schools are
this is not.
basically a cult these days. I mean, it's a vicious cult. And so sorry, but that's what parents don't seem to understand as much as they should.
Yeah, 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 it's a great opportunity. You gotta figure out. I don't know, man. Like, so the homeschooling crowd is very it's very cool in that, these are parents who are not just watching their kids until they don't have to, or they had kids because they felt like they had to, or, they got more agency, and they want better outcomes, and it's a great, it's a lot of work, obviously, to educate your kid. But it was interesting to me to learn, in, like, 10 days ago, about that was how the Romans did it. It was the mom in the home until the kid was, I don't know, I forget, it was like 12 or 13, but, the first, like, 5 years of the education, something like that, if I remember right. But it was it was basically homeschool. Like, Roman was, like, basically home. Like, I'm like, "This is amazing." Like, what a cool crossover. But, if you can't depend on anybody to have your kid's best interest in as much as, like,
Right.
as a parent does,
Well, so if I were
And
in your shoes, I would take a shift from content creation to marketing creation, because if you can get a short, powerful video talking about the dangers of the modern curriculum, and here's the lines, here's the charts, here's the bullying, here's the promiscuity, and then, if you want your kids to be socialized, we all want our kids to be socialized, but not in a crime gang, right? But we don't want our kids to be socialized by dropping them off at the homeless encampment and the drug addicts den, and we want our kids to be socialized by good people. And unfortunately, there's just fewer and fewer good people in school, so we need to start looking for alternatives. Like, that ship is going down, and do you need a lifeboat? Ah, here come the angels. So I would focus on 30 to 60 seconds of school ain't what it used to be. And here's how it's changed. And here's the danger your kids are in. And they're not learning. They're being programmed. They're being indoctrinated. And they're in danger. Like, they're in existential danger of thinking that they're terrible people because of ideology. And you got to do something to help them. And, our solution is, so if you, even if all you do is don't even post your solution, but just have a short video that doesn't, like, you need to bring people to your mind space as a whole. And so even if you just did a video that was totally shareable, that didn't mention anything about your solutions, but came from your channel, then if it gets shared and debated, and if it goes viral and so on, then people come to your channel, and then you have your other videos. But talking about the fundamental driver as to what it is that you're doing, I think, is that good kids are in real danger. And there is an agenda to harm your children, to break your children, to turn your children not just against themselves, but their parents, their history, their culture, their country, everything. It's really dangerous. You got to know who you're handing your kids over to. And, you don't hand your kids over to Jeffrey Dahmer for cooking classes. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a strong analogy, but but
Jeez.
if you just talk about how school has changed and the level of programming, propaganda, agendas, and so on, and that the old argument that you send your kids for socialization is no longer valid. You send your school for, reading, writing, arithmetic, and socialization. Well, they're not getting reading, writing, arithmetic. They're getting infinity genders and communism, and they're not getting socializing. They're being bullied by teachers, and any kid who stands against the agenda is going to be ostracized, attacked, and bullied, and you're throwing your children to the wolves. And so if you do
So
a video
violent,
like that,
random violence.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if you do a video like that, which with your skills, I'm sure you could rip off fairly quickly, then I think that you're generating understanding of a problem. Because again, you can't sell diet pills to a skinny guy, right? And you can't sell ice to the Eskimos. So if people don't even know that they have a problem, there isn't any demand for a solution. And the solution for homeschooling has been, school is too secular. We need our kids to stay super Christian. And again, I have no particular issue with that, but that's the fact. But if you want to get a market, you have to create a market. Otherwise, you're just trying to hack away at getting kids from already pre-existing groups with homeschooling groups that have been around and sorted out and settled for decades. It's really tough. So I didn't go and say, well, I want people who would normally take philosophy in university to come and listen to my show. I had to create an audience of people who didn't even know that philosophy was valuable or helpful, who didn't even have a clue that philosophy could help them in their daily lives and could help them choose the right partner to get married to, help them raise their kids, help them make more money if that's what they want to do, or at least succeed in their career. It could help them with the quality of their relationships. Like, philosophy has never been sold in that way before, because I don't think it's ever been aimed at those kinds of particular problems. It's all abstract, esoteric problems and so on. Do we live in a simulation? I mean, that's all well and good, but I do have to choose who I'm going to marry. And that simulation argument really doesn't help me that much. So I created an audience by identifying that the reason people's lives were failing was they were not thinking clearly and didn't have a good grounding in ethics. And I say this of my own life as well. I had to figure out my own life this way, and those So I created an audience of people who didn't even know they needed philosophy by saying that the issues in your life stem from a lack of wisdom, as the issues in my life stemmed from a lack of wisdom, and so on. And so the best way to get an audience is to make one. Like nobody knew they needed an iPad until there was an iPad, and then everybody needs an iPad. And so I would say that if I were in your shoes, I would work as hard as I could to shake people out of their hypnosis about government schools, to help parents, particularly older parents, understand it ain't like it used to be. It is not at all like it used to be. Like that neighborhood you grew up in that's now surrounded by crack dens, you don't want your kids to live in that neighborhood. You just haven't noticed how much it's changed. So make a video to help parents understand just how toxic government education has become and how it's neither serving reading, writing, arithmetic, nor socialization. And don't even provide a solution. Because then it just sounds like you're making a problem to sell a solution. Like if you talk about rising obesity and then say, I have this drug, then it's, people have skepticism because they get the agenda. But just putting out, here's why your kids need to be homeschooled, that isn't going to touch the Christians as much because the Christians already understand that. And of course, the Mormons, a lot of whom are very nice people, of course, the Mormons they already understand that. The Pentecostals, the Baptists, the Lutherans, they all understand that. So I think you want to hit the parents who don't understand how bad school has become and yet may have some doubts or may even not be allowed into homeschooling groups that are fundamental Christianity. I think that, because it sounds like that's the curriculum you're working on, and I would work to create that audience rather than try and capture an audience that's already flowing fairly consistently towards long-established Christian homeschooling groups.
No, yeah, that's a good point 'cause, there's turnover and people pick different curriculums, the Facebook groups are just flooded with people, like, saying, "Hey, we tried this, and this, and I need something new for my 4th grader," or whatever. And yeah, you're finding an argument to be made to those people, you're gonna get this and that, but
And sorry, last thing I'll say, and I
mm,
don't want to overburden you with options, and we'll sort of wrap this up in a sec. But what I would say as well is that one thing from what I've talked about over the years with people in homeschooling groups in America is that homeschooling groups are kind of girly in that it's the moms running things. And, we love the moms and it's great, but, masculinity is not in excess supply because the men are usually out there, particularly in Christian families. The men are doing the traditional breadwinner roles and the women are running stuff. And that comes with some very cool stuff and some very positive stuff. But it also comes with some negatives, in particular for the boy students. And homeschooling for boys is a big challenge because it is a hyper-female environment for most homeschooling. If you have more of a masculine approach to homeschooling, which if you're going to take the Roman curriculum, that's it, I would also point that out as well, that in the homeschooling groups that I, again, tangentially know about, this is one of the complaints that people I know in those homeschoolings have is like, it's just so female. And again, we love the females. I wouldn't want it to be all male, but for the boys, it is not. Boys learn from men and girls learn from women in general. And there's some crossover and so on. And having a homeschool group that's focused on males and masculinity is another big differentiator that is kind of tough because the homeschooling groups, by being so relentlessly female-led, female-driven, and female-focused, it doesn't click with the boys nearly as much. And then the boys end up a little bit more feminized, which makes it tougher for them to be the leaders of their households, if that's what Christianity indicates. So it's a short-term solution that creates a long-term problem, as so many of these things are. So I'd also focus on that. So sorry, if I want to
and
give you
that's
the last.
and just to dovetail, and that's still another problem with the public schools, is that, it's going more and more female teachers, and so it's, that's kind of a feminine system too, but the last thing I was gonna, point out or whatever was that, in addition to all the problems that which get worse every year in the public schools, my wife pointed out that something that parents can reflect on, and something that's been consistent is they never really ask you. She was pointing out, like, they never really ask you to make to make an argument, like, to make it to convince people of anything. It's always like give a presentation on, butterflies or something that's, like, you have to think of 10 minutes worth of stuff and nobody really cares and you're not getting good feedback or whatever. It's never convince people of something that, maybe half the class doesn't agree with, and
But
that's,
that's because it's female.
yeah,
Because
oh, that's
female is
true.
about consensus and information sharing, not, men butt heads and try to come up with the best solution. So having the rhetoric, the debate, the argumentation style, boys like that stuff, don't you? I mean, I spent half my teenage years arguing with my male friends about everything under the sun, and it was great. And so, yeah, having that focus on conflict and how to fight with words and still remain positive with people, I think is something that you focus on the male, focus on maybe a bit more secular stuff, and and then help people understand how toxic public school is. I think you're gonna build a better mousetrap, and the world will beat a path to your door. And I think that's the best you can do. Now, did you want to mention? Is there a website? Did you want to mention how people can find what it is that you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, please. Well, it's Romeschool, and don't go to romeschool.com because, somebody took that over, 15 years ago, and they've got a beef with an Australian, mining company, and it auto downloads a video, and so you wanna stay away from romeschool.com. We're working on that, as a branding issue, but romeschool.app is the website for our homeschooling, and yeah, yeah, the last thing I'll say is, if we get a foothold and this becomes a thing, I think that you'll be able to see people that have gone through this program, like, in the future. In fact, one of our, my ads or whatever that I'm looking forward to maybe making is something like, like a couple of moms sitting there watching a politician giving a speech, and one mom says to the other, like, "Was he homeschooled? Like, I heard he was homeschooled." And then the other one says, like, "Rome-schooled." You know what I mean? It was like
Nice.
it's like that's a it's a "Oh," and then she goes home and enrolls your kids in the Rome school, it's 'cause
He's the
it's,
one politician in a toga with a laurel wreath.
Oh, that makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, yeah, Romeschool.app, and, we're gonna be up and running here and ASAP. It's, we're trying to get this kicked off before the beginning of the next school year because that's, now's when people are making their, for the next month or so, when people are making their decisions. So if this gets out there in the next, who knows when, then, check it out. It'll be, ready to go probably by the mid to late, July. We'll see, at least in some form, and then it'll have its refinements. We're gonna have a half off deal for, like, the people that sign up right away, t half off for life, basically, to the early adopters who are willing to put up with our bumps, for the next year, and then it should be golden after that, and you'll have your half off for the rest of your life. So check that out, and, thanks. I can't believe I had a real discussion with Stefan Molyneux. How fun.
I really appreciate that. That's romeschool.app.
That's
And
correct.
keep me posted. I'd love to see the videos that you come up with next, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks.
All
Thanks
the
so much.
best. Bye bye.
Alright, bye-bye.